Hi, my name is Shcherbakova, and I'm a co-developer of the Baseworks method, and I will be your host for this transmission conversation today. The Baseworks method is an approach to movement and physical practice that has a profound effect on perception and the quality of day-to-day and moment-to-moment experiences. And the Baseworks transmissions look at both concrete and abstract realizations that come up as a result of commitment to any type of practice or pursuit to achieve life goals. And our goal here is to come up with common vocabulary to better describe these experiences and outcomes. In this conversation episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Johanna Calderon, an interdisciplinary researcher, educator, and music performer from Colombia. Johanna's journey began with her studies in cello and music history in her home country before taking her to Amsterdam, where she earned her master's degree from the Conservatory of Amsterdam, specializing in early baroque music. Currently, Johanna is an associate professor and researcher at the Autonomous University of Bucaramanga, where she also leads the Transdisciplinarity, Culture and Politics group. And at the same time, she's also pursuing a doctorate in musicology. She has dedicated her career to interdisciplinary projects that connect musicology, cultural heritage, and promoting peace and reciprocity through music and arts. This episode explores Johanna's experiences and insights at the intersection of music, physical movement, and self-expression, where the line between daily existence and art becomes blurred. We talked about how shared music production can be used as a medium to rebuild broken ties among people in post-conflict Colombia, and touched upon many other fascinating topics. In this episode, the conversation unfolded in a mixture of English and Spanish. So for our listeners who might not be bilingual, we've made fully English and fully Spanish subtitles that are available as captions on the video version of this episode. We highly recommend watching this episode to get the full experience. For everybody watching, I would like to explain a little bit about our connection with Johanna, because a few years ago she wrote us. She was interested in Baseworks method because it's a movement method, and in general she's interested in movement, and we're going to be talking about that. So we had some communication, but it was a few years ago, so we forgot about it. And then this year, when we were organizing workshops in Colombia, in Bucaramanga, we sent her a message saying, Johanna, we're having some workshops, why won't you come? And it turned out that she works exactly in the university where we had the workshops, and exactly at the Faculty of Music, where we also had a workshop for students of music. So I'm very happy to have you on this transmission.
Muchas gracias.
I will be maybe speaking in a mixture of English and Spanish, and Johanna va a hablar en español. Johanna, thank you very much for coming. And can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Because you're a musician, but you're also a musicologist. So what is it that you play? What is it that you do? What is it your profession?
Muchas gracias, Asha y Baseworks, por la invitación. Yo soy violonchelista. Mi instrumento principal es el violonchelo, pero debido a que hice estudios de maestría en música antigua en Ámsterdam, también interpreto otros instrumentos antiguos como la viola da gamba y el clavecino harpsichord. Esos son mis instrumentos, y en Colombia, cuando puedo, realizo conciertos interpretando. Y como musicóloga hago mi PhD, mi doctorado, en Buenos Aires, en Argentina.
And why were you interested in música antigua?
Bueno, la música antigua en Latinoamérica no es muy conocida, es una práctica muy de los países europeos. Por eso fui a Ámsterdam, y porque Holanda es una potencia realmente importante en música antigua, en enseñanza de la práctica de la música antigua. Y es un repertorio musical que me encanta, me fascina la música antigua. Tiene que ver también con el lenguaje, con el idioma. Tiene unas maneras, unos gestos musicales que son únicos y muy particulares de la música antigua. Estamos hablando desde la Edad Media o el Renacimiento hasta el siglo XVII aproximadamente, y se prolonga un poco más.
I think there's a lot of ancient music in Colombia as well. Would it be correct?
Yes, it is. Podemos rastrear la música antigua a partir del siglo XVI.
16.
Y en Colombia tenemos un archivo que es el más antiguo de música colonial, o uno de los más antiguos en toda Latinoamérica, incluyendo Centroamérica, México. Y ese archivo conserva partituras del siglo XVI y está en la catedral, la catedral más importante en Bogotá.
So you are performing music, but you are also studying the history of music.
Absolutely, yes.
What makes you interested in history of music? How does it supplement your perception of music or your performance of music?
Creo que la historia no es solo algo que sucedió en el pasado, sino que se vuelve algo muy importante cuando interpretas esos hechos del pasado y los traes al presente. Allí cobran una importancia mayor, porque si estudias la historia y la traes a tu presente, puedes entender de dónde vienen ciertos elementos musicales, ciertas prácticas musicales. Entonces puedes comprender mejor qué es lo que pasa hoy a partir del estudio del pasado, digámoslo así.
Interesting. So, because we are here in Colombia and we're speaking Spanish here, and some of the workshops we're doing here, we were doing partially with interpretation. One thing that I noticed in this process that I think is very relevant to our talk today is that the word performance, as for example, musical performance, to translate it in Spanish, we would use the word interpretación, which sounds like English word interpretation, but it doesn't mean the same. So interpretation in English can mean translation, like linguistic translation from one language to another. But in Spanish, interpretación is performance, like artistic performance. But there is a very big difference in the word performance and in interpretación, interpretation. And the word interpretación sounds more like it requires more from the person, who is doing this interpretación. So they interpret the work, right? And I guess there is maybe an element that, let's say I have a music sheet, right? And maybe when I'm performing it, I'm not doing it exactly like the composer. So that's maybe one side of it. But the other side, as for example, as you were just saying, that by studying the history of music, it changes how we entender, how we perceive and understand music as well, right? And this is also a very big part of this interpretación, right?
Absolutely. We can define performance as the act, not just the interpretation of an instrument, but the whole experience. Entonces, esto fue lo que experimenté en un proyecto que luego voy a conversar contigo.
Yeah.
Y es como ir más profundo en la experiencia del performance. Performance tiene muchos elementos. Hay un elemento de preparación en tu instrumento, pero hay otro elemento de comunicación con el público. Entonces, lo que he estudiado en los últimos años es más que una interpretación o un concierto o un recital, es tratar de tener una experiencia inmersiva, psicológicamente hablando, tanto para el público como para mí como performer. Entonces, creo que allí hay una diferencia importante entre la palabra interpretación musical y performance musical.
Yes, totally. And also this element of communication. I'm sure that many musicians, many artists, they would also, who are not Spanish speakers, they would also talk about the connection that they have with the audience. But somehow this word interpretación, it's almost like when you're trying to translate, something, and when we translate it for another person so that another person understands us, right?
Perhaps we can understand interpretation as the first step. You know, you are just beginning on your career as a musician. The first step is just to read, and then perhaps just to read out loud, yes, and then to perform. But it comes with the years and with the experience of life. You cannot replace that.
We wanted to talk about the work that you did related to the interpretation of the work by a Colombian composer, Blas Emilio Atortua, right? Yeah. And we're going to put a video in the show notes so that everybody can see what we're talking about. But I would like you to talk a little bit about that work and why was it important to include physical movements in that particular performance? And also, I know that you are currently writing a thesis about the life and work of this composer. So yes, if you can add a little bit more about that, that would be very interesting.
Ok. Bueno, este proyecto comenzó por mi interés y el de un colega pianista en la obra de quizás el compositor más importante de Colombia del siglo XX. Es un compositor muy reconocido, tanto en Colombia como en los Estados Unidos y en toda Latinoamérica. Él compuso 4 obras para cello y piano de chamber music. Entonces, empezamos a trabajar con mi colega buscando esa idea de performance, ¿sí? De inmersión, ¿sí? No simplemente hacer un concierto un poco frío, tocar las obras y clapping at the end, sino que fuera un poco más allá en nuestras vidas, también como seres humanos, que la obra musical nos tocara profundamente. Entonces mi colega pianista decidió hacer textos en donde él expresaba sus experiencias de vida, algunas traumáticas, con el piano. ¿Sí? Y lo que yo decidí hacer fue trasladar, es un poco difícil de explicar aún en español, pero tras interpretar o trasladar algunos gestos que están presentes en la música y convertirlos en movimiento. Entonces, en el performance final, yo realizo una serie de movimientos, que es casi un ritual de movimientos entre cada una de las obras, y allí con mi cuerpo expreso los gestos que están en la música. Entonces fue todo un proceso de experimentación con 8 cualidades básicas del movimiento. Una de ellas, por ejemplo, es golpear, ¿sí? Entonces, la idea fue experimentar con estas cualidades y llevarlas a la música. Es más o menos la idea general del proyecto.
Do you think that the audience can see the connections between the gestures of music and the physical gestures that you are doing?
Sí, creo que ellos sí pudieron encontrar una conexión clara entre los movimientos corporales y la música. Pero más allá de buscar esa percepción del público, lo más importante era el espacio de inmersión psicológica también. ¿A qué me refiero? Si vemos la música, la partitura, vemos, por ejemplo, que el compositor puso una dinámica, por ejemplo, piano a forte. How to do that with your body? That's the question. How to do that? Entonces, el experimento era no solamente ver la partitura, sino tratar de encontrar el movimiento sin el instrumento, pero experimentado solo con el cuerpo. Y de esta manera estoy segura que ese efecto que él quería, que el compositor quiso, realmente pudo llegar al público. Es un trabajo muy, muy minucioso, de muchos elementos muy complejos. No creo que haya cubierto todo el gran significado profundo de las obras. es casi imposible y el público no creo que haya asumido todo, pero creo que la impresión general de la experiencia la recibieron muy positivamente.
And when you yourself listen to music, do you somehow in your body translate the gestures of music into body movements?
Yes, I think if I'm listening music, I can feel it in my body, in my skin sometimes, and then I have this kind of need to just get up and dance. Sometimes it happens to me. I need the movement to understand music. It's something that I've been learning from myself, that I need to move. Really, it's a need in order to understand what the music means.
What kind of movement practices are you doing?
At this moment, I'm doing yoga. I don't have a lot of time because I'm working with many other projects. I reduce all my practices of movement to yoga because it's the only thing I can do during the day and every day. So at least I keep that.
In the past, what else have you done?
Well, in the past, I practiced Tai Chi. And in fact, I have such a wonderful teacher in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
He's a percussion player, mm-hmm. but he also practiced Kung Fu mm-hmm. During his youth. And I practiced every day with him mm-hmm. During 2.5 years. That was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, really. Yeah, but then I came back to Colombia and I finished that practice.
So you mentioned something about ¿qué significa la música? So what music signifies, or what it means. I'd like to ask about how you feel it changes your perception of music when you formally learn the structure of music.
Yo creo que cuando aprendí esta estructura de la música, eso lo que yo veo es que yo lo aprendí hace muchos años, entonces estoy como en otra etapa, no sé bien cómo explicarla, pero eso ya pasó, como las bases de la música, la estructura, pero eso ha ido cambiando con el tiempo, mi manera de aprender ha ido cambiando. Entonces ahora aprendo más con el cuerpo, trato de entender más con mi cuerpo. Entonces trato de entender una estructura musical de una obra from my mind and then just it goes straight to my body through the dance or the yoga or Tai Chi or wherever, or just walking through the city.
So because you have studied music for so long, I guess for you, the perception of the structures in music, it's your second nature right now. So what you focus more, what's more important for you at this moment is to interpret music through your body. Yeah. This is where you are at this moment.
Absolutely.
So one of the reasons why I'm asking this is because my mother sometimes, so my mother really likes classical music, but sometimes she tells me about her experience with some friends from an orchestra, and she has this fear that if you learn to understand music formally, somehow you will lose the perception of its totality, that it's going to all break apart and it's not going to be beautiful anymore. And what's also interesting is that in Baseworks, sometimes, you know, when we talk about this decomposition of movements and learning to be more conscious about various elements of movements, a few people, including dancers, asked me, don't you think that if you do it too much, you won't be able to, move holistically somehow? Do you have anything to comment about that fear, that learning about the elements will somehow just completely destroy the beauty of the entire thing?
The beauty. It's very difficult to explain because that's like to talk about magic or something like that.
Yes.
That is, it lies very deep into music.
Mm-hmm.
voy a contar una historia. Hace algunos años hice una práctica que es dirigida por un psicólogo argentino. Es un método de psicología y tiene un componente muy fuerte, muy poderoso de corporalidad. Entonces, la teoría es que los traumas que hayas pasado en tu vida, pero también otras cosas que no son traumas, se quedan instalados en tu cuerpo. Entonces, para sanar, necesitas llegar a esas partes de tu cuerpo en donde están los traumas como allí pegados. It's just an image of the body. It's just the imagination. I don't know how it works, but it works. Even if you have a very deep trauma, it is into your bodies. For some people, the trauma is so deep that even if the person goes to a psychotherapist every day, the life is not the same. It's so deep. For example, victims of the conflict in Colombia and their families were assassinated, for example, in front of their eyes. I mean, you cannot forget that. It's just the impression in your mind and the trauma in your body. Entonces, en esta práctica corporal, tú escuchas música y dejas que la música mueva tu cuerpo en la manera que tú quieras y le das paso a tus emociones a través del movimiento corporal y también de la voz. Es un componente esencial de esa práctica, de esa terapia psicológica. Entonces creo que el cuerpo es un mecanismo extraordinario y a través de nuestro cuerpo pasa todo. No sé si respondí a tu pregunta, pero quería traer esa experiencia porque es muy poderosa y cuando te dejas llevar por la música es verdaderamente sanador del trauma que se tenga. Y los resultados para el mejoramiento de la vida de la persona los puedes ver casi de inmediato, como en Baseworks, que haces un pequeño movimiento y todo cambia y la persona se siente mejor. Creo que esa sería como la conexión con lo que me preguntabas.
So the music somehow helps to find a way out for the tension that the person feels.
Absolutely. I believe in that. I don't know for the professional musicians, for example, the musicians or the person who works every day for a symphonic orchestra. I don't know. I mean, I'm not there anymore. I just quit from that environment. The orchestra is not for me, for my body. I don't know how to explain it. I think the work with an orchestra is so hard. It's incredibly hard. And perhaps this musician, for example, a violin player in a professional, very famous orchestra, I don't know his state of mental health. I don't know if he's taking pills or whatever for, I don't know, nervousness or something like that. I think that I'm in a very nice moment of my life. I'm free from that. So I'm very lucky. I'm doing exactly what I would like to do at this moment of my life.
And have you played in an orchestra?
Yes, here and many years ago.
Many years.
Yes. And yeah, that's not my practice. That's not for me. I have to confess, because, well, it's in a way, it's a way of living. I respect that.
Yes.
But for me, it's extremely hard just to be there for hours and hours without the possibility of movement. It's like a prison for me. But for other people, it's just heaven. I don't know. It depends.
You know, when we were preparing for these workshops for the music students, we had to, look through research, about the physical problems that musicians have. And it turns out that among musicians, sometimes 94% of professional musicians, they have pain and tension, and some really, really high percentage, they have to seek medical help because of that. And also, while we were talking, to the musicians in the workshop and after the workshop, they're all saying that we're working with the body. So it's interesting that we somehow focus sometimes too much on the technique, and we, in a way, ignore the body. So we talked to people and we saw how, they have tension, all over. But at the same time, we have another situation where we can use music in order to, let certain things out. But also, it's a very different approach to using music, right? Because when you are in a symphonic orchestra, you cannot just allow yourself to just do whatever you want when you hear music, right? You're like a cog in a machine, right? And you have a conductor, and essentially you have to become, I don't know, in a way, it's like linguistic interpretation, where you have to kind of let go of your ego and you have to become a small part of a big whole, right? And this entire thing is working, to create something big, but, it can be taxing on the body.
Absolutely. Especially the rehearsals. I think that's like hell. I think that the body is the place where you can go through hell or you can go to heaven, because the body hurts. You can have a lesion. I have a lesion here from my practice, and I have to understand that and to live with that, But the pleasure of life is also through the body, It's like the place where your spirit is going through all those processes. You cannot ignore your body. And I'm also telling to my students, please don't ignore what you are feeling. I mean, you are not a robot or a stone or whatever. You have to listen to your body, whatever the body tells to you. Sometimes the body tells, look, I'm just feeling really bad. I just want to sleep. Just go to sleep. Don't go to work or do many other things just to escape what the body is telling you. For example, the emotions. If you are feeling sad, you are sad. You cannot cover that. You are doing really a very bad thing when you are not honest with your body and your feelings, and you start just lying to yourself and automatically to other people. If you are not able to connect with your body.
So hearing how you speak about the tension of the trauma and about the importance of connecting with the body, I want to ask you about the work that you do in relation to music in relation to armed conflict in Colombia, and also the projects that you have right now where you're trying to use music for peace, So can you please tell us a little bit more about that?
So if you've resonated so far with any of the topics discussed, please consider sharing it with others and clicking the like button. This is really going to help more people find it and support all the efforts that go into this production. Your being here to check out this episode today is a massive contribution toward the sharing of ideas that unfold in these talks, and thank you very much for your support. And subscribe to get real-time notifications about all upcoming episodes.
De pronto ustedes sepan que Colombia ha vivido en un conflicto que quizás es el más largo del planeta. Es un conflicto armado interno, no es con otros países, es between us. Entonces, este conflicto ha durado más o menos 60 años. Varias generaciones hemos vivido las consecuencias de eso. Ha llegado a unos extremos de violencia muy altos, y en este momento estamos en una etapa posterior al gran conflicto. Entonces muchas personas trabajamos para brindar opciones desde lo que sabemos para ayudar a construir un tejido, unas conexiones entre personas que se perdieron, que se dañaron, ¿sí? Entonces, en este momento trabajo pensando algunas opciones para trabajar tanto con víctimas como con las personas que hicieron ese daño, que son daños muy graves, muy, muy, muy serios. No son cosas pequeñas, sino muy, daños muy grandes sobre personas y comunidades. Entonces, la idea es, a través del arte, de la música, crear espacios en donde las personas podamos encontrarnos y buscar respuestas a lo que pasó. Podemos sanar, pero si no sanamos, no hay problema. Es demasiado fuerte el daño que se hizo y el dolor. Entonces, en este momento trabajo pensando en alternativas artísticas para crear estos espacios de convivencia, de estar juntos, a pesar de todo lo que haya pasado. Es complicado.
It sounds very interesting. Can you be more specific about what type of music is used in such spaces and how exactly?
Bueno, el centro de todo es un modelo muy grande de justicia. Dice que tenemos que trabajar con lo que saben las personas. Entonces, si una persona no conoce el violín o el piano, tengo que buscar otras herramientas a partir de lo que las personas conozcan. No traer algo externo y tratar de imponerlo a la fuerza, sino que trabajamos con lo que nos dicen las personas y adaptamos. Entonces, hay ciertos tipos de música, tal vez no música clásica como tal, europea, pero sí música que se hace en el territorio donde estamos trabajando.
But are people listening to music, or are they actually taking instruments and they're performing music?
It can be both. It can be both. It can be like teaching or the practice or just taking contact with an instrument and just speaking with other people. The music is not the center, it's the experience with the people,
With the people, okay.
Just meeting in that space, and the excuse is art or music. But the main purpose of the activity is just to create again the links between the people that were damaged.
So if they are, for example, playing instruments, doesn't mean that they will try to play music together?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's not
that can be an option. Yeah.
So it's not that, for example, they're listening to a certain type of melody that appeals to certain types of emotions, but rather the activity of trying to, for example, make music together is what rebuilds the connection.
Exactly. It's just to be together in one space. But it's because it's very difficult just to be with the person who did such bad things. I mean, it's complicated. But at this moment, many groups of victims, they have been working like with psychotherapists, and they are really prepared. They are really organized. They know perfectly their rights, and they know the limits of everything. And most of them, they don't want just to forget things, even they don't want to forgive. But they are aware that that's the only option for this country. We cannot continue just killing each other. That's the reality.
So in relation to connections between people in the society, I want to ask you something. We went to an exhibition in Montreal a few months ago, which was dedicated to Colombian art of people of
Arhuacos.
So we're in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, right? And this exhibition was an exhibition of certain sacred objects that were taken from those people, and there were some videos and additional lectures which were explaining certain philosophy of these people. And first of all, they have these music instruments, ocarinas, right? Yeah, which look like animals or birds, and when they play those instruments, their belief is that they reproduce the sound of nature. So there is a very, very great interconnectedness with the nature. And at the same time, also another part of the philosophy is that, for example, when they take something from nature, let's say they take clay in order to make a pot that they're going to use in their household, they feel like because they're taking it from nature, they need to think it somehow or ask permission. And so they have rituals about that. And so there's this very important sense of interconnectedness with nature and also among people. And these people of Arhuaca, when they were collaborating with the museums in order to organize those exhibitions, what they were saying is that they feel it's very important to spread this philosophy, to the world, so that because they feel that's very important. And I was just wondering how widespread is this philosophy in Colombia, whether everybody shares that. Do you have the same, for example, in a city like Bucaramanga?
En Colombia hay muchas comunidades indígenas todavía. Si comparas con países de Latinoamérica en donde han sido totalmente arrasadas. En Colombia todavía tenemos. Ellos tienen un gran sentido de conexión con la naturaleza todavía. Pero ellos están muy lejos de las ciudades. Colombia es realmente grande y hay territorios muy inexplorados, particularmente al sur de Colombia. Cuando vas hacia el Amazonas es selvático. Son zonas muy inexploradas. Entonces nuestra conexión en las ciudades con las personas en la selva o en territorios desconocidos del país es muy poca. En la ciudad tú no tienes tanta conexión con la naturaleza. Now, at this moment in Colombia, we know a little bit better about the communities and their traditions, But for many years, they were just rejected. And that was really painful. And the Arhuaca community in the Sierra Nevada, there are a lot of other communities. And now we know that they suffer immensely with the conflict. They were killed, and especially the connection with nature was really, the conflict changed everything. So, for example, if one person killed another, and the body is on the surface of the earth, the Mother Nature suffers, and that blood contaminates the territory. It is amazing, and it's just amazing how they connect everything with nature, and the Mother Nature is everything for them. I mean, for us, So at this moment, those communities are working in the process of the post-conflict and those communities, they got just like injured by the conflict, so they are really apart from other people. And that it's true that if they take something from nature, they have to do something in return. I mean, that's fair, no? And they are really worried about deforestation because that's the reality in Colombia. The mines and all the oil extraction, and Colombia has a lot of natural resources, but that is also killing the territory. The extraction and deforestation of the territories is killing Colombia. That's really that we are working right now, just to be aware what is happening with nature in Colombia.
And the community important among families? Like, where would you find the strongest sense of community in Colombia?
I think in family.
In family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in some regions in Colombia, it's really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for the indigenous communities, the sense of not family, but that is the other structure that is in Spanish is clan, that is this very tight bond.
Yes, clans.
Clans,
Yeah.
exactly.
Clans.
And they have that. And but in general in Colombia, we can talk about family. Yeah, family is very important for us.
And are you planning to stay in Colombia?
I don't know.
No?
I don't know. We'll see. I'm just trying to finish my thesis dissertation in 2 years, and we'll see. Yeah, I would like to go south. I love South, Chile and Argentina. I love those countries. I really feel very good when I visit those countries, and I would like to spend some time there, a couple of years perhaps.
Just doing something professionally with music, or just
Yeah.
being in nature?
Yeah, I think perhaps I can work there for short periods, but we'll see.
And in relation to, so you mentioned that you do not want to be in an orchestra at this time of your life, but what about creative projects?
Yeah, I would love that. And at this moment, I'm working with a dance company here in Bucaramanga, and it's just fantastic. I love that. I can spend hours and hours and hours there.
So are you dancing, or are you
Dancing, acting, and playing. So it's everything at the same time, and the interactions with other dancers, and
Yes.
it's fantastic. And I can improvise music that is very good. I like that very much. I'm more in that direction, that in the orchestra organized institution.
Do you think that working with your body somehow helps music improvisation?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's say if I were to look at you while you improvise, is it more happening in your head, or is it happening in your body? What the act of improvisation, could you describe the feeling of music improvisation, the way it happens to you?
Yeah, I'm just talking with you, and I feel it. I don't know if I'm a little bit kinesthetic, but I can just feel it in my body. I don't know how to explain it. Perhaps you will explain that to me better. But for improvisation, you can do many things, not just playing. You know, that's the classical idea of improvisation, that you can do it only with your instrument, but you have a body, and the body sounds too, and you can move with your body, and you can improvise movements too with your body, not just with the instrument. So I discovered that, and that was really great.
Do you also do dance improvisation?
Yeah.
Why are you saying it like
At
that? Yeah.
home.
At home. Why
At home. I just put music, and that's everything. I just go with the flow of music, and that helps me a lot. Yeah. And I think that's improvisation, because I think that in certain moment in your life, you have to transform your life in art. So it's better if everything in your life, it's not about harmony. You can have conflict in your life, absolutely. And you have to deal with that, with other people, different opinions. But in your body can be also art. When you are breathing or you are walking, you can walk in different ways. But as soon as you are conscious of what you are doing, you can do art in every moment of your life, with your voice, with your movements. So when you eat, you are eating something and it's delicious or it's horrible. I mean, that's art too. So I believe on that in certain moment your life becomes art, but it's a process.
You know, I really resonate with what you're saying right now about how your life and the simplest movements become art. And we were talking about it, for example, during the conference, how developing, spatial awareness just makes your experience, moment to moment experience, an aesthetic process, right? But hearing what you're saying right now, I'm wondering, first of all, when you're saying that your life becomes art, and you give an example of eating, that eating becomes art, right? It's not the type of art that you are doing for another person, right?
Exactly.
Like, and it's not, we are not talking about this process of interpretation to transmit certain information to another person.
Absolutely.
We're talking about it for yourself. You enjoy it for yourself.
Exactly. When it's the moment of your life when everything it comes like there's coherence in your life. Even the slightest thing in your life. I mean, it's not a part or something really chaotic or whatever.
So everything becomes somehow interconnected.
And it goes with this central line of your life. I don't know how to explain that, but that's the image.
And do you think it happens to everybody? And do you think it's a phase in life that happens to everybody, or is it something that you need to look for in order for it to happen?
Wow. That's difficult because anyway, you need to learn how to do it. And right now, at this moment, I think we have a lot of tools, to develop consciousness and perception and to be more aware. And not just the cell phone, and not that, but we have the science of yoga, we have Baseworks, we have Tai Chi almost everywhere. That's really amazing. So you have the tools. Okay, so you have to go to the class, the yoga class, and do the class. That's an option that is conscious, And perhaps if you go every day and you do this kind of process, you will find this harmony in your life, perhaps.
Coherence.
This coherence.
So it's not a harmony in a way that it's a very balanced state where you're in peace, but it's more of an artistic expression.
That coherence, that for you is aesthetically right.
Aesthetically right for you. Great. So you as a musician, how many years have you been as a musician?
Like, I don't know, I'm 45. Let's see, 40?
Okay. Yeah, so for, 80% of your life you have been a musician. But what I hear right now when you give, so you say there are tools that you can use in order to find this coherence. But the tools that you mention, they are movement tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's and by the way, it's not staged at all. Yeah, I was not expecting Johanna to say that, but it's very, very interesting for me to hear that, right? Because you're a musician, right? So you study the technique and you work with, public performances. So you are an artistic person, but then at this moment of your life, somehow conscious movement is what you find brings the coherence in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, what if we look the world as a stage? As a stage?
So in a way, a word and a stage where you are the main
exactly.
character.
You are performing. You are always performing, always. Well, perhaps not when you are really sleeping, really in this deep state of...
How would you say that in Spanish? If you were to say that, I am on a stage and I'm always performing. How would you say that in Spanish?
Estoy en el mundo y estoy actuando.
Actuando, okay. So you're actually acting. So you're acting out, right? The way you are, you're acting out, and you're looking for a coherence where your actions and perceptions, they become completely coherent, like a work of art.
Well, yeah, that's my theory. I don't know. But I don't know. I cannot disconnect parts of my life. If I'm coherent, I cannot experience an imbalance. How can I experience conflict with one person. That's not coherent. So I have to work on that, you know, in order to be aesthetically correct for myself. But it's like to be in every space of your life and to be just checking what is happening, you know, but it's not, the life is not separate. Everything is connected completely.
I'm specifically interested in what you described as a constant state of art, when your physical experience becomes essentially a process, an artistic process, right? A performance for yourself, right? And so this coherence, right? So do you sometimes talk to other people who say, oh yes, I feel exactly the same?
I don't know. Well, sometimes, you know, I was talking recently with a colleague, but he's an historian. And we were talking about that, how to make life like an expression of art. But he was talking up from the historian perspective, and I was talking about how music can do that, you know, and I was talking from the artistic perspective. And it was the same, almost the same. He's also a poet, so he has this kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's easy for him to connect with art, but he's an historian.
And how was he talking about it? How does his work in history translates into his experience being an art?
Yeah, he told me that he was working for a project of the university, and they are trying to decide like the general perspective of the university and what they want from the students. So he was just doing this, writing this text, and he just connect that, life and art. And it was really amazing. The text was really complex, but it was very interesting, that connection. And I think it will work, because before our university, they talk about harmony, how to make your life in a harmonic way. And life is not like this. So it was like, what is that? So now they are working in this definition, in this general definition for the students. It's like the general guidelines for the purpose of the university in society, and especially in relation with the students. Yeah.
And so, because we're talking about the University of UNAM, which is the Autonomous University of Bucaramanga, right? And I also mentioned it in the conference, how the keyword autonomy is just somehow feels so important, because what is autonomy? Autonomy is when you are acting out on your own, right? So this, as you said, actuar, right? So you're acting into the world on your own accord without being told by somebody else. So in some ways, the sense of autonomy is also, maybe we could use the word coherence to talk about it. By the way, in Japanese, for autonomy, the word will be jiritsu, but it has two spellings. You can write jiritsu as stand on your own, but you can also write it as spin on your own, or, you know, play on your own. So ji is yourself, and this ritsu is the ritsu, which means a rhythm in music, right? So very, very deep meaning, right? Jiritsu is somebody who can not only stand on their own, like a child, for example, right? But also somebody who, you know, has this internal music or rhythm, you know, and they just, essentially, they kind of go into the world and they just follow their own rhythm, right? So I don't know, this
that's really amazing.
Yeah, so I just feel like all these linguistic connections are very, very interesting. Okay, so you were talking to a historian about this life as an artistic expression, right? Anybody else?
No, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Well, now you're talking to me about it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yes.
Asha, thank you.
Yes. So
for the opportunity.
Right, but why do you think you are not talking about it?
Because you have to perform it. You cannot explain it without performing. You can write down something about that, but in order to in order to become art, life has to be performed fully and completely. So I can just write down and I can send you an email about my vision of art, life as art. But in order to prove that I'm doing that, I have to do it in front of you. Otherwise, you won't believe it, or you won't understand what the meaning of that.
But you're saying that you are the performer for yourself, right? So the art is just, it's not for somebody else. It's just you live and you experience your life as a coherent work of art, and you're the sole observer essentially of that form of art. And you talk to another person who is a historian, and he also had a certain sense, you know, of kind of acting into the world and experiencing their life as a coherent work of art, right? So in this sense, it seems like you don't really have to prove to anybody that you are in this state. I mean, of course, you could lie to me that you have this state, right? But I don't think you are lying, right? But somehow it seems like, I don't know, I think it's a really good state, isn't it? Right? To be at a stage of your life where you can say that your life is like a work of art, right? So it's not balanced maybe, but there is this sense of coherence. But
but you know, I did many years of psychotherapy.
Okay.
So at the end of that, yes, I understood many things about the chaotic things and out of control things in my life. Some things happened in my past, but I was not present. I was just there, and things happen. Really bad things happen. And at the end of that, and many years later, and after talking hours and hours with a psychotherapist, I understood that I was like, I don't know, in another place. My mind was in another place. I was just the body, and things happened, and I was like, okay, you know, accepting.
Yes. So a release of something.
Things that they were not coherent with myself. I was like traicionándome a mí. I was not with myself, you know, and so many bad things happen. That's life, and you have to learn, perhaps like this.
So for you personally, you feel that psychotherapy was also important in order to find that state where you are right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like a really deep crisis in my life. And also I had health problems. And that was the bottom of everything. So after that, like, okay, where is the light at the end of the tunnel, you know? And I had to do psychotherapy, otherwise it is impossible, I mean, just to go from there.
Right. Well, so there are different, I guess, tools. Different people need different tools at different times of their life.
Yeah.
And this is also why you are doing right now this work with people who have lived through trauma and have done trauma, you know, on others.
Yeah. And I hope that I can just help a little bit, or at least learn a little bit from them. That is the other option, right? Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have touched so many interesting topics. It was really great, you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so very much for putting things into words, you know.
Yeah.
I think it is so important because, look, this state that you described, I think it's very important, and it's a really good place to be, but you only talk to one person in the past, right? And now you talk to me about this. And I really hope that people who are going to be watching or listening, then they will also hear about that, right? Okay. Although we don't have a word for that state, I think it's very interesting. And I can very much, I don't know, relate to it.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much.
If anything that you heard today resonated with you, please consider liking it or sharing it or subscribing to our channel or even leaving us a 5-star review. Your contribution helps us to reach more people with the content that we are sharing. If you have any ideas or comments that you would like to share with me or us, please send them to ideas@baseworks.com. To benefit from exclusive content delivered right into your inbox, consider signing up for our newsletter from the footer on any page on our website. And to know more about Baseworks specifically and everything that we're doing, visit our website at baseworks.com.